All right, so I figured that a good way to kind of test out some new equipment that I've got, specifically a voice recorder, would be to do kind of a rig walk around of Lemon Lime, my 1958 Jeep CJ5. So to start off with, the name comes from the color, which I think is fairly obvious to what it is now, green and yellow. So it's also kind of an homage to Fred from Dirt Every Day's CJ5 that he has that is called Lemon Pie, which has inspired me on a lot of the stuff that I want to do with Lemon Lime. Like I said, it is a 1958 Jeep CJ5. It's mostly stock from what I've been able to figure. I think it's got a shackle lift up front, and if I'm not mistaken, that's what this here is set up as. But other than that, it seems to be pretty stock. I'm running it on 31 by 10.5 and with 15-inch wheels for the tires. They're General Grabber X3s, which have done a pretty good job on pretty much every trail that I've taken it on. I guess aesthetically, it is a little bit rusty in a lot of places on the body. You can see spots here and there, especially in the inner tub. Got a lot of my tools kind of sitting here for when I actually get back to trying to pull the bumper off, but like you get little rust holes here and there all over the place. And this diamond plating on the rear is from the previous owner, covering up some rust holes. But other than that, it's in good shape. The frame is solid, which I'm very glad about. The frame on the Rolling Turd is not, as you might know from a previous video. So the transmission is a 3-speed manual transmission. I can't remember what the model is. I think it might be a T19, but don't quote me on that. The normal H pattern. So reverse is up, and then first, over, and up for second, and then third is down, as the twin stick Dana 18 transfer case, which is a pretty stout setup. A lot of people run even small block Chevy V8s still using that same transfer case with no issues. It's a gear driven transfer case, so it's very, very stout. The seats are not the original seats. They are actually out of a Jaguar. I don't know what model, just that's what the previous owner said. Based off of how comfortable they are and how high quality the leather covering is on it, I would say that he is not lying. And they're something that I'm definitely not going to remove from the Jeep, because they help with a lot of the bumpiness that you'll experience riding in a completely leaf-sprung solid front axle vehicle. The axles, as far as I can tell, are both Dana 25s with both front and rear. The nice thing about the Dana 18 transfer case is that it has a passenger side offset, which allows for both the front and the rear differential pumpkin to be in line. It's handy for when you're off-road, because you only have to line up one set of differentials instead of trying to line up for different offsets. The bumper on the rear here is a pretty custom job. I don't think that there's anywhere you could have gotten that. Don't think the owner or previous owner ever mentioned to me whether he made it himself or had someone else make it, but it's definitely a backyard job. This jerry can it looks good, but it's actually not useful at all because of the fact that it is that it has, I guess, no filler spout on it. You got this lid here just kind of opens up and doesn't actually have like a funnel or anything like that, and it's really not conducive to working with funnels. Once I finish opening it, see that it's just an empty hole essentially, which means that if you try to actually use it, you're going to end up spilling more gas than what you actually get into the vehicle. That fire extinguisher is not up to date, but I do know it's full. You can see based off the pressurization on it, but I'm not actually going to trust it to put out any fires. It's just there to remind me that I need to buy a similar sized fire extinguisher in the future. One other custom thing the previous owner did was put in this this fancy, not so fancy, gun holder here. Can't quite tell, but down in the bottom here, there is where the butt would go, and then you got the part on the dash that would hold the rest. The engine is what they call the F-134, or the Hurricane engine, which is the next engine that came after the Go Devil 4-cylinder engine, which was in World War II Jeeps and CJ2As and CJ3As. Despite the name, it's actually not an F-head engine. I don't actually remember off the top of my head all the reasons why it isn't, so I'm kind of parroting on that. An interesting thing I found out about the air filter here is that it's actually an oil pumped air filter, so you got to be careful opening it, and that's why there's oil kind of crusted on the bottom of it, because it has oil running through it. The previous owner said that the engine was rebuilt about 8,000 miles ago, which is, as far as I can tell, accurate. Runs and drives really well. Well, I guess it runs really well. The driving part is questionable. The steering box is something that I really need to replace in order to get it actually driving well. It's got a whole lot of play in the steering, which is a little sketchy considering it is a manual steering vehicle, and that solid front axle makes it kind of shaky. Let's see. So current plans for it are I just want to get the bumpers that I have already purchased for it mounted. I have a winch bumper that'll go up on the front. I have a tire carrier bumper that will go on the rear. After that, I'm not 100% sure what I want to do, but I do know that I want to have this thing be very overbuilt for just about any trail. I'm not planning on increasing the tire sizes at all. I like the look of it with the 31-inch tires, and I'm not particularly fond of super high lifted vehicles to begin with, let alone something as short and as narrow as this one. Being super tall and on something like 35-inch tires. Yeah, so I'm thinking potentially that I will do a Dana 44 axle swap in order to get some extra axle strength, as well as the ability to put in selectable lockers. I can get just auto lockers for it for pretty cheap, but since I want this to continue to be a daily drivable vehicle, I'm not really interested in having auto lockers for a street vehicle. Other than that, I may eventually do an engine swap. I actually really like the way that the Hurricane runs and sounds and all that stuff. But I don't know, it's not really an overtly powerful engine, but at the same time, this isn't a heavy vehicle. I think I weighed it at about 2,300 pounds, so it doesn't need a lot of power. But the biggest issue that I have with it is the fact that since it's a 1958, it's really hard to find quality spare parts for it. Not a lot of people kept the Hurricanes in their Jeeps just because of how small they are. A lot of people did a small block Chevy swap or something similar to that. And as a result, there really isn't much of an aftermarket at this point for parts to put into it. So if I have something break down, I'm going to have issues getting replacements for it. And since I want this to be kind of a long-term expedition vehicle, even though it is fairly small, I need something that's a little easier to find parts for than this 4-cylinder engine. Unfortunately, for the stock nature of it, because for collectors, this is actually a 100% numbers matching vehicle. I've checked the stamps on both the engine block, the axles, chassis, and so on. They all match. So it is kind of a collector-worthy vehicle, but I didn't buy it to be a collector vehicle. I bought it to be used, so we'll see kind of what happens. Admittedly, all of those plans are fairly expensive, and right now I don't have a lot of opportunities to go on hardcore off-road trips, so there's not a whole lot of reason for me to do expensive upgrades as of yet. A lot of this is for further down the road. But yeah, so that is Lemon Lime. As I said, we're going to be doing some immediate modifications with the bumpers, but very quickly a lot of those modifications will be finished, and hopefully I'll be able to get Lemon Lime out on the trails.